13th, 2019, Foster High School, Tukwila School District. To Tukwila School Board District members, with less than a full month of school left in our academic year, we as Black teachers and teachers of color write this letter with exacerbated urgency and with a clear demand that our school district's most powerful decision makers not only hear us, but take quick and decisive action in response to our numerous attempts to seek accountability for the climate of anti-Blackness that exists in our schools. Okay. Don't even stop. Trying to keep the flow up to the.
You got it. You got it.
Righteous fury mixed with. Okay. The experiences and conversations we will outline in this letter are not new. In fact, they are historic and deeply rooted in the foundation of white supremacy upon which this nation was built and continues to thrive. As Black teachers and teachers of color in the Tukwila School District, we must clearly and decisively state that the climate of anti-Blackness in our district is not only wreaking havoc on our Black student population, but is also effectively forcing out the few Black teachers and teachers of color in this district who, without question, bear the weight of responsibility in cleaning up the trail of painful messes that the inaction of our administration leaves behind.
Naming our current political context, our high school is a microcosm of the current cultural and political climate. It's a climate that promotes incendiary, racialized attitudes and protects those among us who are willing to fan the flames of racism away from self-reflection and accountability, and towards the people who have historically stood directly in the line of fire. It is a climate that penalizes Black people and people of color for bravely naming the systems of racism in which we exist on a daily basis, and excuses the violence inflicted upon our Black students and teachers, even as we see them suffer right before our own eyes. It is a climate that values surveillance and policing of Black communities and communities of color. It reinforces the racist notion of law and order, and yet simply refuses to create a set of clear expectations that will prioritize the safety of Black students and teachers. We have had enough.
As Black teachers and teachers of color, we want to amplify and support the voices of the Black Student Union at Foster High School. We demand that the school district develop a clear set of policies and guidelines rooted in equity in order to directly address the patterns of racism and anti-Blackness in our school.
Acknowledging patterns of anti-Blackness and racism in our school. As Black educators and educators of color, we have worked to name and address the racist and anti-Black microaggressions experienced by staff and students. These incidents include, but are limited to, the following: non-Black students' pervasive use of the N-word, teachers using the N-word, staff excusing the use of N-word by non-Black students, teachers who fail to respond and directly address racist and anti-Blackness behaviors and attitudes in their classrooms, Black Muslim students being questions about Ramadan, implying that they weren't intending to pray, but rather just skipping class. A Black student being presented with a most likely to go to jail award by their classmates while under the supervision of a teacher. Teachers who consistently and specifically pull Black students out of their classrooms for discipline. A white staff member questioning whether white privilege is real to a staff member of color. White staff members being consistently asked to step into leadership roles within the school while overlooking the potential and contributions of Black staff and staff of color.
I also just wanted to acknowledge that I teach at the middle school and wasn't on the original team of folks who wrote this letter, but I wholeheartedly support them and am here to support them. These daily experiences are the results of a school culture in which the status quo is prioritized over the safety of Black people and people of color. Meanwhile, our efforts to name these daily indignities have been met with a hesitancy to take action by our administrators and fellow educators. And furthermore, we are often asked to educate and explain the impact of the harm that had transpired. We believe that having a clear set of policies and guidelines will help support and empower decision makers at every level by putting an end to the pattern of minimizing and dismissing the harm that has been inflicted in our community.
Working towards an accountable community. These experiences highlight the lack of structures and processes in place needed to address patterns of racism and anti-Blackness. Without clear guidelines and policies, our school is rendered an opaque maze, wherein all members of the school community must navigate without clear directives, while Black people and people of color are forced to face the brunt of the consequences.
I would also like to frame my reading of this letter by sharing that I got a non-renewal notice yesterday. In order to create an accountable community, we need to build processes and structures that support the learning and growth of our community.